In this Burnout Extra, we're going to show you how to replace your head gasket in a 1993 Honda Civic Del Sol. Helping us out in this video is Tommy, and Tommy is the owner of this Del Sol. Although the disassembly footage we have is not up close and detailed, I'm going to do the best I can to describe what is being taken off the car and the proper steps needed in order to access the head gasket in the first place. The first thing that you're going to want to do is disconnect the spark plug wires. Now these are just 4 wires in the middle of the engine. Then from there you will want to take off the fuel line, which screws on. You can see it right here. After you've taken off the fuel line, you want to disconnect the intake hose and the small hoses that are connected to the intake all around it. So you will see one large one that needs to be disconnected first, and then there's a couple air vents and things like that that also need to be disconnected. From there are 4 injector wiring plugs, and those plugs are once again located in the middle of the engine, right near where the spark plug wires went to, and those 4 injector plugs will need to be removed as well. From there are bolts holding the intake onto the engine from the side. Now these are a little challenging to access, however, once you're able to get those out, then you can remove the intake itself. And that can come all the way out of the car, especially because you've disconnected the intake hose like we took off before. Having the intake be outside of the car will help you greatly with the amount of space you have to work, and ultimately will make your process go faster. So it's easier to just take the intake right out of the car. After that, there are bolts holding in the distributor from the left side of the engine if you're looking at it from the front of the car, and the distributor should just pull right out from the side of the engine, and you can put that aside as well. Once the intake and distributor are taken care of, now it's time to worry about the exhaust manifold side of the engine, which is towards the front of the car. Now, once again, there might be some bolts that are tricky to get to here, but once you have all of the bolts off of the exhaust manifold, then you can pull that either from the top of the engine out or just slide it down to the bottom of the car. And yes, the dipstick did get in the way for us, so you might have to move that as well. Now on the other side of the engine, it's time to remove the timing cover. And once you do that, there's a timing belt that it will actually be helpful to notch with a marker. You can see Tommy here is making a note of where the belt actually was on the pulley, and you want to notch the belt and the pulley so that when you put it back together, nothing will be out of time. After that, there are 4 bolts holding down on the valve cover, and you can just remove that top part there. And from there, you will see that inside the top of the engine now, there will be head bolts that need to be removed as well. Finally, there's a hose and a sensor on the passenger side that need to be removed. So this hose needs to come off, as well as a little sensor that threads off too. And these need to be removed in order to take the head off of the car. Now, once those are released, you can actually tilt the head towards the driver's side of the car and then just slide off the timing belt. This will allow you to get the timing belt off without having to take off that side of the engine. So like I said, you could just hold it up and tilt it, and you can see as Tommy pulls back the belt itself, and then he can reattach it later on. Once we got the head out of the car and we were actually able to look at it, you can see that this head gasket was pretty beat up. Although it's not the most damaged thing of all time, it almost definitely was the issue here, and there were different parts of it that Tommy and I didn't feel confident in because it seemed to be worn out and very old and brittle. Now, the next steps are very critical before you actually start the assembly process. And as of now, it's important to clean the engine block as well as the head of any remaining old gasket material from the old gasket. You can see that he is carefully scraping the engine block to make sure that the old gasket material does not go inside the engine, and instead it just scrapes off into a napkin or outside of the engine. Furthermore, scraping the head with a razor blade on the head itself, that can allow you to get off all the old gasket material from the head and then wipe it down clean with some brake clean after the fact. This may apply to you or not, but sometimes there is coolant that gets into the top of the cylinders when there's a head gasket leak. Coolant is something you don't want in your cylinders, so at this point you can just take some paper towels or a towel or rag and remove that coolant from the cylinders itself. Thankfully, in our case, there was not much coolant at all, and so we were good to go and ready to install the new head gasket. Now, once the head gasket is in place and you're ready to go with your head, it is time to tilt the head once again, and that will allow you to put the timing belt back on. Once again, you just slide it over the top. It might be a little tight and tough to get on. However, in this process, you want to make sure that the new head gasket you just put on, you're not destroying by tilting the head. So although you do have to tilt the head here, just be aware of the new gasket that we had just put on. After the timing belt is fully on, then you're good to tighten the head bolts, tighten down the valve cover, the timing cover, and place the distributor back in place. However, don't forget about the hose and the sensor that we pulled out beforehand. So put on the hose and the sensor first, then the distributor can go on afterwards. Now, it might seem self-explanatory, but from here you will then want to install your intake as well as your exhaust manifold. Those both bolt on to either side of the engine. Don't forget about the fuel line that you disconnected previously, as well as linkage, your spark plug wires, any electrical plugs, and any miscellaneous hoses that you removed before from the intake manifold itself. Now finally, don't forget to check the oil in your engine, as well as top off your radiator with antifreeze. These are two steps that ultimately you want to check because you don't want either of those fluids to be low. Once everything is tight and good to go, you've successfully replaced a head gasket on an old Honda Civic Del Sol. These Del Sols are highly underestimated. This car is actually pretty cool. And what's great is you can take off the roof and put it in the trunk. And it doesn't stop there. The entire back window rolls down with the click of a button. And this one's a standard, so that makes it even better. But I guarantee you that you'll see this Del Sol in a future video, maybe even an episode here on Burnout. So be sure to subscribe, hit the like button if you found this helpful, and stay tuned for even more awesome content to come in the future.